Thank you everyone for being here. I'm Killian.
And I'm ZeroFoxGiven.
Suit in, strap up. You're listening to DormalTalk.
Today's episode,
Spine-tingling tales of horror.
What They Don't Tell You About the Dead by Sai. I don't want to sound mean, but the dead are pretty clueless. I've always seen them. When I was younger, everyone I thought I was just talking to imaginary friends. After a couple of years, when I overheard my parents talk about it, calling a psychologist, I realized what I was talking to. See, ghosts don't tend to realize they're dead, and they don't look like in the movies. They just look like us. I'm pretty smart for a 13-year-old, so I started noticing certain patterns to tell them apart from the living. They could be a bit distant from living people, or you'd see them try to talk to people who wouldn't even notice them. Some of them could tell I was different, that I noticed them. Like this guy I saw after school yesterday. I'm a big boy now, see. I don't need my parents to pick me up. Home is just a short walk away. He was standing away from the other parents, didn't talk to them, just stared at me. That's how I knew he was one of the ghosts. I went over, told him, I knew what he was, and asked how I could help him. I don't remember much after that, I think because of what happened this morning. Downstairs, my parents were crying. I tried talking to them, but they ignored me. They must have died last night somehow. Sometimes new ghosts won't talk to me. Some police officers and reporters have just arrived. They won't talk to me either, just my parents. It's weird. I've never seen so many ghosts together before. Why won't anyone talk to me?
Sad. Sad story. Kind of Sixth Sense vibes.
Except on the reverse side.
Yeah, exactly. Poor kid is dead. Doesn't even know it.
And obviously that guy wasn't a ghost. Obviously he was the one that turned him into one. And I like how the setup says, sometimes they don't realize it. And of course he's the one that doesn't realize it.
The irony.
Seriously, yeah, and it's funny because the thumbnail does show the scene from The Sixth Sense, and I was thinking it was going to be something along that lines, but I thought possibly he'd end up in an institution, or they blame them for the murders or something. But yeah, it's rough. So I Lost My Phone by Linux. Last night a friend rushed me out of the house to catch the opening act at a local bar's music night. After a few drinks, I realized my phone wasn't in my pocket. I checked the table where we were sitting at, the bar, the bathrooms, and after no luck, I used my friend's phone to call mine. After 2 rings, someone answered. They gave out a low, raspy growl and hung up. They didn't answer again. I eventually gave it up as a lost cause and headed home. Upon arriving, I found my phone laying on my nightstand, right where I had left it.
He's still there. He's still in the house. Get out.
And see, it doesn't clarify if this guy lives alone or not. I'm going to assume yes based off that because this is supposed to be scary. So my mind would have been oh, I'm getting cheated on or something, like the girl's with some other dude or whatever. But on the flip side, and the way that this is phrased, it's dude, someone's in my house. That or someone's living in my house and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it would be hilarious if it was just his roommate. That's just on either side of the story without context. It's just something that's not said. It's by the way, it should be known, I do live with 2 roommates, so I guess it could have been one of them.
But that's the thing, what if he doesn't?
Then that's cause for concern.
There's actually been stories that people were living inside other people's houses. One was the owner of the house rented it out, but there was a secret room / crawl space, so he would live in there. We'd watch the tenants just whenever you wanted to because he was living in that secret room, and people had no clue. And then there was one of a homeless lady that found an opening in an air duct and was living in these people's air ducts. People would notice my food's missing, things are not where they were. Little things out of place, nothing too concerning, until one day they came home early and found them.
That's disturbing.
Yeah, dude, I don't know how it would feel if somebody answered my phone and just giggled, and then I find it sitting on my nightstand.
Yeah, I'd break the lease, dude. I'd move out for sure.
Yeah, definitely. The Eyes Are Watching Me by Reclutus. I bought a new house in the small town of Winthrop. The house was cheap, but the most important part was that I needed to get away from the city. A few months ago, I had a run-in with a stalker. While I had just managed to get him arrested, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes just constantly watching me. I felt like there were eyes everywhere, at home, on the street. So I decided to move out into the country somewhere with less people, just for peace of mind. The house itself was big and somewhat old, but otherwise very welcoming. The agent who introduced me to the house had been required to mention that a serial killer had lived there in the past, which was why the house was so cheap. However, he, and later my next door neighbor Sarah, both told me not to pay it no mind. 4 other owners had lived in the house since then, and all of them were very happy with it. I loved the house. Its interior furnishings were beautiful and very comfortable. The people of Winthrop were very friendly, often bringing over fresh baked pastries or inviting me over for dinner, get-togethers they said. They were the key to making sure everyone who lived in Winthrop loved it here. Yet after a week I stopped loving it. The feeling of someone watching returned, worse than before. I tried to ignore it, but soon I started losing sleep. Giant bags grew under my eyes. I began yawning almost as much as I breathed. Sarah was kind enough to let me stay at her house for a few nights. It was during this time that I heard the legend of Forrest Carter, the serial killer who had lived in my house. While no one knows his exact kill count, Carter, also known as the Winthrop Peacock, was a man with extremely severe case of narcissism. Legends say that he couldn't fall asleep if he didn't feel like he was being watched. He was finally arrested for putting up a scarecrow to watch him during the night. Only it wasn't a scarecrow. Carter had murdered a 17-year-old girl, just so her corpse could stare at him. The story gave me shivers, and after I went home, I felt like there were hundreds of pairs of eyes just watching me, no matter how I turned. Today, however, was the first time that I acted out. I was cooking breakfast. When I felt the eyes instinctively out of fear, I threw my kitchen knife, which lodged itself into the wall. As I pulled it out, I found myself staring at a pair of eyes, pickling in formaldehyde. I've been watching the police peel away the dry wall of my house for hours now. So far, they found 142 pairs of eyes in little glass jars. The scariest thing, each and every one was staring at me.
Huh.
I love that.
I'll tell you what really didn't do it for me is just the fact that all the eyes were looking at him. I think this was a really good story. I think there being hundreds of jars of eyes on the walls is really cool. It's just a little beyond my realm of belief for them to all be staring at him.
Well, here's the thing. I don't actually believe they all were staring at him. I think he was just so freaking paranoid that to him it seemed like that. Because, I mean, they're floating in a jar. Yeah. So, obviously, you turn and look. It looks like they're looking at you. But they have, like, no consciousness. They're just floating in a jar. So, him being the paranoid, like, oh, they are looking at me. But, nonetheless, dude, so many pairs of eyes looking at him. Like, and they didn't know his kill count. And how many pairs of eyes did they say? I think it was like 117. Yeah. Is that what they said? 142. Jesus.
The setup with the stalker from the first place they lived, and just that idea from the get-go of being watched, and then being the feeling of being watched being so general and trivial, and I think everyone's kind of felt that before, but we always just kind of brush it aside. I think the next time anyone who's listening feels like they're being watched, they might not just brush it to the side as easily as they have before.
That, or maybe it's just a vampire in a room. Fallers by Dastard82. People started falling from the sky by close of the decade. They were never clothed, always naked, always a petrifying grin on their faces. It had been just a few at first, but then hundreds and thousands would fall at a time, destroying cars, homes, blocking off highways. Strange discoveries were made upon research. They were human, but lacked any blood, intestines, or even a heart. No one could explain the hideous grins they had, or even where they came from. It was a woman in Costa Rica who made the latest and most disturbing discovery. She recognized one of the fallen bodies as a long-dead relative, one who died back when she was a teenager. Then, more and more identifications were made. Soon people were picking out their long-dead loved ones amongst the video feeds, cadaver piles, and crematoriums. No one could explain why they were coming back, falling from the sky. Even more distressing, after disposing of the bodies, it wouldn't be long until that same body came plummeting from the sky again. You could not get rid of them, no matter what. People were getting killed by the higher volume of the falling bodies, and soon after their burial, they too began to fall. My mother was killed when a body landed on her car, crushing her. The next week, the news reported on a body that had gotten lodged in an airplane windshield. I saw my mother's grinning face, the happiest I had ever seen her. They say when hell is full, the dead shall walk the earth. But what about heaven?
Oh man, so heaven is all filled up and they're just getting discarded? They can't get in even though they've been a good Christian this whole time?
I don't know, man. Or maybe his mom went to hell and he just doesn't want to admit it.
That could be it. I mean, the thing that makes sense about heaven is just the huge blissful smile they all have on their faces. They should be happier than they've ever been.
To a degree, though, but think about it. People that are in hell are probably pretty sadistic, and if they know they're crushing people and killing other things, they may actually be enjoying that.
They may, but I don't know if these bodies falling from the sky know anything. It seems like they're literally just bodies, and the consciousness of it has been absorbed.
Right, but like I said, the whole grin situation.
They're coming down, big old smile on their face, but they say, you know, that's one of the most blissful moments is like right before you die and you see the light or whatever. So it makes sense that their bodies would be smiling. I don't believe their bodies to have any consciousness tied to them, though.
I legitimately have never heard that. That, like, you're always the happiest right before the light. Never.
I've heard it's just overwhelming, like ecstasy, like just pure happiness and warmth as it's overtaking you.
That's an interesting thought. I never thought about that. I've seen a lot of people go, and I don't usually tend to see happy faces or smiling. Maybe they find comfort at the end, but as far as it is when it's happening, I have not seen smiles or grins in that manner.
I've been lucky enough to not see a lot of people die, so I'm sorry for you that is something that you're well acquainted with. But before my grandma died, my great-grandma, I remember her saying things like she was ready to go and she was prepared to go and she was looking forward to it just because she was so old and her body was hurting and it just would have been better for her. So I do know at least one person that was not fearing death as much as welcoming it.
To be fair, most of the ones that I saw was not expecting or welcoming it. So it's not really a happy feeling when it's not something you want or expect. The Accident by Minboy. It was 1 a.m. and Guy Halverston sat in his dark living room. He hadn't moved for over an hour. The accident earlier that kept playing over and over in his mind. The light turned red, but he was in a hurry and accelerated. An orange blur came from his right, and in a split second there was a violent jolt. The bicyclist rolled across his hood and fell out of sight on the pavement. The horns blared angrily as he panicked, stepping on the gas, screeching away from the chaos into the darkness, shaking, keeping an eye on his rearview mirror until he got home. Why did you run, you idiot? He'd never committed a crime before this. He'd punished himself by imagining years in jail, his career gone, his family gone, his future gone. Why not just go to the police right now? You can afford a lawyer. And someone tapped on the front door, and his world suddenly crumbled away beneath him. They found me. There was nothing he could do but answer it. Running would only make matters worse. His body trembling, he got up, went to the door, and opened it. A police officer stood in the porch light. "Mr. Halverson?" asked the grim officer. He let out a defeated sigh. "Yes." I'm terribly sorry, but I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your son's bike was struck by a hit-and-run driver this evening. He died at the scene. I'm very sorry for your loss.
Well, that's what happens when you hit and run, dude. Instant karmic reaction.
You know, I thought he was actually going to go crazy on the cop or something. But, dude, like, when I read that last part, like, that hit me hard. Not as hard as a car, but Jesus.
That just goes to show, if you ever hit somebody in your car, you should stay and offer assistance no matter what the ramifications are. because you could have accidentally hit a loved one.
100%. Even if it wasn't a loved one, no matter how you look at it, it's kind of you remember the first Spider-Man movie? Really, most Spider-Man mediums in general. But in his origin story, he's a professional wrestler, and there's a guy, robbing, and he's all like, "I'm not worried about it. That has nothing to do with me." And he ends up being the guy that kills Uncle Ben. And even though he's not involved with it, like, he could have done something and chose not to.
Yeah, it's choosing the righteous path could have kept Peter Parker. He could have saved him from a lot of heartbreak.
And actually, the 90s Spider-Man cartoon really did that justice, too, because besides that beginning part, in the last episodes before they canceled it, he actually was helping, like, save the world in all these other dimensions, like the Spider-Verse, which is why everybody, like, mentions, like, the Secret Wars and everything, from Spider Carnage. So Carnage ends up bonding with one version of Peter Parker, and he just goes insane, after Uncle Ben's death with it, and it's crazy. And the way he's able to, like, calm him down and, like, fix things is they go into another reality where Uncle Ben didn't die, and he's able to talk him down. But it's pretty intense.
I think, like I mentioned earlier, that's just has to be one of the more black and white examples of karmic reaction, in writing. And I think that's what that will always be. I don't see that getting cliche anytime soon. Having an opportunity to do the right thing, not doing it, and having it come around and bite you in the ass afterwards, I think is going to be something we continue to see in a lot of different types of stories, superhero stories, scary stories.
Yeah, no, really. And it just speaks to, like, the nature of people, because some people are, like, so selfish that when they're doing something that they want, it screws them over more. And then you got the virtuous people that in this day and age sometimes also get bitten in behind more, but it's significantly less unless you're one of the selfish ones. Thank you for joining us on DormalTalk. Make sure to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And we'll be back at you with another video soon. And as always, have a wonderful day.